The unwanted princess. The Zindari imperial palace stretched across the horizon like a glittering scar of crystal and metal, its spires piercing the amber sky as three moons hung heavy above. Inside the grand hall, Emperor Vax Zor of the Zindari Empire paced before his throne, his scaled skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with barely contained rage. Before him knelt his daughter, Princess Riella, her head bowed, shoulders straight, but the slightest tremor betrayed her fear. Unlike her father's aggressive red scales, hers were a rare shade of silver blue that marked her as different from birth. Now those differences had become intolerable to the emperor. "You dishonor me again," Emperor Vax Zor's voice reverberated through the hall. "An emissary from the Morth Collective comes to negotiate surrender terms, and my daughter, my blood, speaks of mercy, of compromise." Riella's gaze remained fixed on the polished stone floor. "Father, I only suggested that complete eradication of their cultural artifacts wasn't necessary after." Silence. The emperor's tail lashed against the throne. "The Zindari Empire has conquered 12 star systems through strength. We are warriors, conquerors. And you," his voice dropped to a disgusted whisper, "you speak of preservation, of understanding. You are weak." The emperor turned to his advisors, high-ranking military officers, whose scales bore battle scars they displayed proudly. "What use is a princess who cannot stomach conquest? Who weeps for fallen enemies? Who questions the glory of the empire?" No one answered. No one dared. Riella finally looked up, her iridescent eyes holding a defiance she couldn't quite suppress. "I am still your daughter. I still carry royal blood. Blood that grows more worthless with each passing cycle." The emperor snapped. His attention shifted as the great doors of the hall swung open. A human entered, and the contrast couldn't have been more stark. Where the Zindari were tall, scaled, and elegant, he was compact and solid. His skin was tan, weathered by countless suns. Dark hair cropped close to his skull, face bearing scars that told stories of survival rather than glory. He wore combat armor that had seen genuine use, not ceremonial polish. A pulse rifle was magnetically attached to his back, and various weapons were visible at his belt. He didn't bow. He didn't kneel. He simply stopped at an appropriate distance and crossed his arms. "Commander Marcus Reed," the emperor announced, his tone somewhere between disdain and reluctant respect. "The human who broke the Krell insurgency. The mercenary who held the Vega blockade with 3 ships against 17. The human's expression didn't change. "Your Highness," he said, the words carrying no warmth or deference. The emperor descended the steps of his throne, circling Riella as he approached the human. "Your service to the empire has been adequate. Your tactics unorthodox but effective. The Zindari reward those who bring victory." Riella felt ice form in her stomach. Something was wrong. The way her father looked between her and the human sent warning signals firing through her nerves. "As promised, payment for your services," the emperor continued. "Credits have been transferred, but I offer a bonus, a gift of royal magnitude." Reed's eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't recall requesting any gifts, Your Highness." The emperor's mouth curved into what passed for a smile among the Zindari, a predatory baring of teeth. "Nevertheless, I offer you Princess Riella of the House of Zor." A silence fell over the hall, heavy and suffocating. Riella's head snapped up, eyes wide with shock and growing horror. "You offer me your daughter." Reed's voice remained steady, but his posture had tensed. "She has no place here," the emperor said dismissively. "Too soft for politics, too gentle for war. Perhaps she can serve some purpose with you, but diplomatic liaison, perhaps, or whatever other use you might find." Riella rose to her feet, trembling with rage and disbelief. "Father, you cannot. I am emperor." "Vax," Zor roared, the patterns on his scales flashing bright with anger. "I can do as I wish. You are no warrior, no true Zindari. You are a burden I now transfer to another." Reed studied Riella for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he looked back to the Emperor. And if I refuse? The Emperor's smile vanished. Then the Empire would be forced to reconsider your landing rights in Zindari space. Your contracts might be reviewed. The mercenary guild you represent could find itself unwelcome in lucrative territories. There it was, not a gift, but a threat disguised as generosity. Riella saw the calculation in the human's eyes as he weighed his options. When do we leave? Reed asked finally. Immediately, the Emperor replied. Her belongings will be sent to your ship. Riella stood frozen in disbelief. I am Zindari royalty, she whispered, but her father had already turned his back. No, he said without looking at her. You are cargo now. Commander Reed didn't speak as they walked through the palace corridors. Royal guards escorted them, but their presence felt less like protection and more like ensuring she didn't try to flee. Riella walked with as much dignity as she could muster, though inside she was screaming. You don't have to do this, she said quietly when they were far enough from the throne room. Whatever my father threatened you with, I can. You can what? Reed asked, his voice low and neutral. Override the Emperor's commands. Protect my contracts when he revokes them. Ensure safe passage for my crew through Zindari space when we're declared unwelcome. She fell silent. They both knew the answer. The docking bay was enormous, filled with sleek Zindari vessels, and a single human ship that stood out like a scar, functional, battle-tested, with none of the aesthetic concerns of Zindari craft. The Obsidian Dawn was a modified Corvette-class vessel, designed for speed and firepower rather than comfort. A small group of humans waited at the boarding ramp. They watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion as Reed approached with the Zindari princess in tow. Boss. A tall woman with dark skin and close-cropped hair stepped forward, hand resting casually on her sidearm. Everything okay? Change of plans, Kai, Reed replied. We've acquired a passenger. Kai's eyes narrowed as she assessed Riella. The Emperor's daughter. That's going to make things complicated. The Emperor's former daughter, Reed corrected. Apparently she's been gifted to us. Riella flinched at the words. Her scales dimmed slightly in response to her emotional state, a Zindari trait she couldn't control. I am still Princess Riella of House Sur, she said, mustering what dignity she could, regardless of my father's decisions. Kai snorted. Yeah. Well, Princess, on this ship you're just another body taking up oxygen. Boss, where exactly are we supposed to put her? We're not exactly running a luxury liner here. She can have the storage compartment by the med bay, Reed said after a moment's consideration. It has life support and a seal. It'll do until we figure something else out. As they boarded the ship, Riella caught a final glimpse of the palace that had been her home. No one had come to say goodbye. No one had protested her father's decision. 22 cycles of existence, and she had made so little impression that she could be discarded without consequence. The ship's interior was utilitarian. Metal corridors, exposed pipes, equipment strapped to walls. Nothing like the ornate architecture of the palace. The air smelled different too, recycled, with hints of machine oil and the peculiar scent of humans. This is it. Reed stopped before a small door. He pressed a panel, and it slid open to reveal a room barely larger than a closet. Metal shelving had been hastily cleared, leaving a space just big enough for a sleep mat. It's not much, but it's private. Riella stood in the doorway, reality finally sinking in. Why did you accept? She asked quietly. Why take me? Reed considered her for a long moment. Your father didn't leave me much choice. But more than that. He paused, something shifting in his expression. I've seen what happens to people the Emperor decides are disposable. At least with me, you have a chance. A chance for what? To become something he never expected. With that, Reed turned and walked away, leaving Riella alone in her new quarters. The ship rumbled to life around her. Through a small viewport, she watched as her homeworld grew smaller, then vanished into the void of space. She was alone among aliens, discarded by her father, heading toward an unknown future. Riella sat on the hard floor, back straight as she'd been taught since childhood. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't break. If she was no longer a princess, she would need to become something else. Something stronger. The journey had begun. The first week aboard the Obsidian Dawn passed in a blur of disorientation and isolation. Riella rarely left her tiny quarters except when summoned by Reed or when necessary for basic needs. The human crew regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. None hostile, but none particularly welcoming either. On the 8th day, Reed appeared at her door just as the ship's artificial lighting shifted to morning cycle. "Get up," he said without preamble. "If you're staying on my ship, you work." Riella blinked up at him. She was still wearing the simplified version of royal attire she'd had on when they left. Impractical, but all she had. "Work? I'm not." "You were a princess," Reed interrupted. "Now you're a crew member. Can you shoot?" "I've had ceremonial training with energy bows, but can you fight hand-to-hand?" "I've studied the traditional Zindari combat forms, but never an actual." "Can you pilot, navigate, or repair ship systems?" Riella's scales flushed darker blue with embarrassment. "No." Reed sighed. "Then you'll learn. Starting now." He led her through the ship to what appeared to be a cargo hold converted into a training area. Exercise equipment, weapon racks, and practice mats filled the space. 3 crew members were already there, moving through combat drills. "This is Riella," Reed announced to the room. "She knows nothing useful. Fix that." A stocky man with cybernetic augmentations visible at his temples stepped forward. "I'm Dawson, weapons specialist. Guess I'm teaching you how to shoot today, princess." "And I'm Kai," said the woman Riella had met upon boarding. "Combat instructor. When Dawson's done making sure you won't accidentally vaporize your own foot, you're mine." "I'm not," Riella began, but Reed cut her off. "You're not what?" "Not going to learn. Not going to work." "Then what exactly are you planning to do out here in the frontier?" "Because I can tell you right now, being decorative isn't a career option." Riella stared at him, anger rising. "I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to be discarded. None of us asked for the hands we were dealt," Reed replied, his voice level. "But here we are. You can spend your time feeling sorry for yourself, or you can adapt and survive. Your choice." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Those clothes. They're not practical, and they mark you as a target. Kai will find you something suitable." When he was gone, Riella remained standing stiffly in the center of the room, feeling every eye on her. Dawson approached, holding out a simple pulse pistol. "Ever held one of these?" "No," Riella admitted. "Well, princess, there's a first time for everything." He pressed the weapon into her hand. It was heavier than she expected. Lesson 1. Don't point it at anything you don't intend to destroy. As the day progressed, Riella's muscles burned, her pride was repeatedly bruised, and her royal upbringing proved almost entirely useless. She fumbled with the pistol, missed every target, and was thrown to the mat by Kai so many times she lost count. By evening cycle, she collapsed onto her sleep mat, every part of her body aching. She was a princess of the Zindari Empire, heir to thousands of years of warrior culture, and she couldn't even handle the most basic human weapons or fighting techniques. But as she drifted into exhausted sleep, one thought formed with surprising clarity. Tomorrow, she would do better. She had to. Because Commander Reed was right about one thing. Out here, she was no longer a princess. She was just someone trying to survive. Trials among the stars. 2 months into her new life aboard the Obsidian Dawn, Riella's reality had transformed completely. Her once smooth hands were now calloused and scarred. Her perfectly maintained royal attire had been replaced by practical combat fatigues and utility boots. Her carefully styled silver-blue scale patterns, once adorned with precious metals to enhance their natural luminescence, were now plain and often smudged with grease from maintenance work. Dawn's cycle aboard the ship found her in the training bay, moving through the forms Kai had taught her. Human combat styles were different from Zindari traditions, less focused on the elegant, sweeping movements that showcased a warrior's grace, and more concerned with efficiency and survival. "Your balance is still off." Kai's voice came from behind her. Riella didn't startle. She'd learned to sense when someone was watching. Another new skill in a growing arsenal. "My center of gravity is different from yours," Riella replied, adjusting her stance. "Zindari anatomy isn't an excuse," Kai finished for her, stepping onto the mat. "You think enemies will care about your anatomy. You adapt or you die." Without warning, Kai launched into an attack sequence. Riella blocked the first strike, dodged the second, but a sweeping kick caught her ankle and sent her sprawling to the mat. "Again," Kai said, offering a hand to pull her up. Riella took it, but instead of simply rising, she used Kai's weight against her, a technique she'd observed during crew sparring sessions. Kai, caught momentarily off guard, stumbled forward, and Riella managed to slip behind her, applying pressure to a nerve point at the base of the human's neck. Kai froze, then laughed. Well, the princess has claws after all." Riella released her. "I'm learning." "You are," Kai agreed, a hint of approval in her voice for the first time. "But learning isn't enough out here. You need to internalize these moves until they're instinct. Is that why Commander Reed has me scrubbing exhaust manifolds and inventory compartments when I'm not training? To build instinct." Riella couldn't keep the edge from her voice. Kai shrugged. "Reed doesn't waste resources, and right now, that's what you are. A resource that needs development." She tossed Riella a towel. "Besides, the commander has his reasons for everything, even if they're not always clear." Before Riella could respond, the ship's alert system activated with a low-level warning tone. "All hands to stations." Reed's voice came over the comm. "We're approaching Hylia Station. Docking in 30 minutes. Riella to the bridge." Kai raised an eyebrow. "That's new. He doesn't usually want you on the bridge." Riella's stomach tightened with both anticipation and anxiety. In the 2 months aboard, she'd never been invited to the command center of the ship. She quickly cleaned up and made her way through the corridors, nodding to crew members she passed. Some nodded back now, progress from the wary looks she'd received in the beginning. The bridge was compact but efficient, with stations for navigation, weapons, communications, and engineering. Reed stood at the center, studying a holographic display of a space station orbiting a gas giant. "You wanted to see me, Commander." Riella kept her voice neutral, professional, the way she'd learned the humans preferred. Reed didn't look up immediately. "Hylia Station is a trading hub. Neutral territory, technically, but the Galactic Coalition has a heavy presence. There will be other Zindari there." Riella tensed. "Are you concerned I might try to contact my father?" Now Reed turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Are you planning to?" "No," she said without hesitation. He'd made his position clear. Reed studied her for a long moment. "This will be your first time off the ship since we left your homeworld. You'll be accompanying me and Dawson to meetings with potential clients. I need to know if you can handle that." "You're using me as a show of force," Riella realized. "The Emperor's daughter, now allied with you. It sends a message." A faint smile touched Reed's lips. "You're learning faster than I expected." "I was raised in politics, Commander. I understand power plays." "Good. Then you'll understand why this is important. These clients need to believe we're capable of protecting their interests against Zindari expansion. Having you with us suggests we have inside knowledge and connections." Riella's scales flickered with a complex pattern of emotions. "You're using me," she said flatly. "Yes," Reed admitted without apology. "Just as your father used you as a bargaining chip. The difference is, I'm being honest about it. The brutal honesty stung, but Riella had grown accustomed to Reed's direct approach. "What do you need me to do?" "Be present, look confident, speak when spoken to, and remember that you represent this crew now, not the Empire." Riella squared her shoulders. "I can do that." "One more thing," Reed added, his tone shifting slightly. "Helios Station can be dangerous. Stay close to either me or Dawson at all times." She couldn't tell if his concern was for her safety or just protecting his political asset. Either way, she nodded. "Understood." Helios Station was a chaotic blend of technology from a dozen different species. Curved architecture reminiscent of Aquilian design flowed into blocky Terran modules, with Vrexian light tubes providing illumination that shifted colors according to the station's artificial day cycle. Currently, the light held a reddish tinge, indicating early evening. Riella tried not to stare as they moved through crowded corridors. After months confined to the relatively small obsidian dawn, the press of so many beings, humans, Zindari, Vrexians, and species she couldn't even name, was overwhelming. Scents, sounds, and sights assaulted her senses. They passed market stalls selling everything from exotic foods to weapons, from ship parts to contraband substances carefully disguised as everyday items. Reed moved with purpose, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around them, while Dawson scanned constantly for threats, one hand always near his concealed weapon. "The meeting is in the neutral zone," Reed explained as they entered a slightly more organized section of the station, a private dining area in an establishment called the Cosmic Fold. The restaurant was dimly lit, with separate areas designed to accommodate the atmospheric and gravity preferences of different species. Reed led them to a section that mimicked standard Earth conditions, where a human woman with augmented eyes was already waiting. "Commander Reed," she greeted them, her enhanced pupils contracting and expanding as she assessed the group. "And company. I admit, I'm surprised by your associate." Her gaze lingered on Riella. "Admiral Chen, this is Riella," Reed said, taking a seat across from the woman. "A valuable member of my crew with unique insights into Zindari operations." Riella maintained an impassive expression, though internally she noted Reed's careful phrasing, not introducing her as the princess, but not hiding her species either. "Interesting," Admiral Chen murmured. "Well, let's get to business. The Coalition is concerned about Zindari movements in the Taurus Reach. 3 colony worlds have reported increased patrol activity near their borders." As the discussion continued, Riella remained silent but attentive. She recognized several operations Chen mentioned, expansions her father had planned before she left, information that could be valuable to Reed and his clients. "The Emperor won't stop at patrols," she finally said, interrupting a technical discussion about defense grids. "These are preliminary measures for a full annexation. It's standard Zindari protocol. Establish presence, identify weaknesses, then strike when resistance seems least likely." Chen's augmented eyes fixed on her. "And you know this how exactly?" Before Riella could respond, Reed interjected smoothly. "As I said, Riella has unique insights. She's been invaluable in helping us understand Zindari tactics." The Admiral's expression turned calculating. "I see. And these insights, how much would they cost the Coalition?" As Reed negotiated terms for information and potential intervention, Riella felt a strange mix of emotions. She was betraying her people, in a sense, yet they had abandoned her first. And the knowledge she possessed could prevent unnecessary bloodshed if it led to better preparation rather than preemptive strikes. The meeting concluded with a substantial contract for Reed's team to provide intelligence and potentially defensive support for the border colonies. As they left the restaurant, Riella felt eyes tracking their movement. She glanced over her shoulder to see a Zindari male watching them, his red scales marking him as a member of a warrior caste. "Commander," she said quietly, "we're being observed." Reed didn't react visibly. "I know. Keep walking." They made it halfway back to the ship before trouble found them. In a less populated corridor, 3 Zindari warriors stepped out to block their path. The leader's scales bore the markings of imperial intelligence. "Princess Riella," he said in their native language, his voice carrying the formal tones of court speech. "Your father, the Emperor, sends his regards and orders for your return." Riella felt her blood freeze. Reed and Dawson had both tensed beside her, hands drifting toward weapons. "I no longer answer to the Emperor," she replied in the same language, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. The intelligence officer's scales flashed a pattern of disbelief. "You are Zindari royalty. You cannot simply defect." "I didn't defect," Riella said coldly. "I was discarded, given away like unwanted property. The Emperor made his choice. I have made mine." "Then you leave us no option but to retrieve you by force," the officer signaled, and his companions reached for weapons concealed beneath their cloaks. Reed moved with startling speed, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. The first Zindari dropped with a stunner round to the chest. Dawson engaged the second, while the lead officer lunged toward Riella. Time seemed to slow. 2 months of relentless training with Kai took over. Riella sidestepped the grab, used the officer's momentum against him, just as she'd done that morning in practice, and drove her elbow into a nerve cluster beneath his jaw. The strike wouldn't have been effective against a human, but on Zindari anatomy, it sent a shock of pain through the central nervous system. The officer stumbled, clearly surprised that the princess knew such a strike. His hesitation gave Riella the opening to sweep his legs, sending him crashing to the floor. She quickly pressed her boot against his throat. Not hard enough to crush, but enough to make breathing difficult. "Tell my father," she said, leaning down so only he could hear, "that the daughter he discarded is no longer his concern. If he sends anyone else after me, they won't return at all." Reed had subdued the third attacker and now stood watching Riella with an expression she couldn't quite read. "We need to move," he said after a moment. "Station security will be here soon." Riella released the officer and stepped back. The entire confrontation had lasted less than a minute, but she felt fundamentally changed by it. For the first time, she had defended herself, not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a fighter. They made it back to the Obsidian Dawn without further incident. Once aboard, Reed ordered immediate departure from the station. "You did well," he said to Riella as they watched Helios Station shrink on the view screen. "Your training is paying off." "They won't stop," she replied quietly. "My father doesn't accept defeat or disobedience." Reed's expression hardened. "Neither do I." In the weeks that followed, Riella's training intensified. The encounter on Helios Station had proven she could defend herself in basic situations, but Reed was determined to push her further. He personally took over some of her combat training, teaching her techniques specific to countering Zindari fighters. "Your people rely too heavily on strength and reach," he explained during one session, circling her on the mat. "They're not prepared for opponents who get inside their guard." Riella had noticed the same weakness during her encounter with the intelligence officer. Traditional Zindari combat assumes superior physical advantage. It's a cultural blind spot. Reed nodded. "Exactly. And cultural blind spots get people killed." He lunged suddenly, mimicking a Zindari attack pattern. Riella countered, slipping past his guard as he taught her, using her smaller size as an advantage rather than a limitation. Her strike landed precisely where she aimed, a light touch to his ribs that, in real combat, would have been a lethal stab. "Good," Reed said, stepping back. Again. They trained until exhaustion made her movements sloppy. Only then did Reed call an end to the session. As they drank water afterward, Riella noticed him watching her with a thoughtful expression. "What?" she asked. "You're different," he said, "from when we first left your homeworld." Riella considered this. "I had to be. Some don't adapt. They break instead." "Is that what you expected? That I would break?" Reed shook his head. "I didn't have expectations, just contingencies." "And now?" Riella asked, suddenly needing to know where she stood. Before Reed could answer, the ship's alarm blared. Not the low-level alert from before, but the full emergency signal. The commander was on his feet instantly, already moving toward the bridge. All hands battle stations. Kai's voice came over the comm. Unidentified vessels approaching. Hostile intent confirmed. Riella followed Reed to the bridge, where chaos had erupted. Tactical displays showed 3 ships closing rapidly on their position. Configuration, Reed demanded, sliding into the command chair. Mercenary vessels, Dawson reported from the weapons station. Heavily armed. Wait. Incoming transmission. The main view screen flickered, and Riella's breath caught as a familiar face appeared. Another Zindari, but not Imperial forces. This one bore the distinctive scale patterns of the outcast clans, Zindari who had rejected Imperial rule generations ago. Commander Reed, the Zindari said, teeth bared in what humans might mistake for a smile, but was actually a threat display. You have something that belongs to neither you nor the Empire. The princess will fetch a handsome price from either her father or his enemies. Pirates, not Imperial retrieval, but opportunists who had somehow learned of her presence on Reed's ship. Riella felt cold anger replacing her initial fear. Reed's expression remained neutral. You seem misinformed. There is no princess here, only my crew. The pirate leader laughed. Semantics won't save you, human. Surrender the Zindari female, and we might let your ship continue on its way. Resist, and we'll take her from your courts. Reed cut the transmission without responding and turned to his crew. Battle stations. Evasive pattern Delta. Kai, bring weapons to full power. Dawson, prepare boarding countermeasures. Riella stood frozen for a moment, the reality of the situation sinking in. She was the reason they were in danger. Her presence had made the Obsidian Dawn a target. Commander, she said, stepping forward. I should. Take the auxiliary tactical station. Reed interrupted, pointing to an unmanned console. You've been studying our defense systems. Time to put that knowledge to use. Riella blinked in surprise. Rather than ordering her to safety, or considering surrendering her to protect his ship, Reed was integrating her into the defense, trusting her to help protect the crew. She moved to the station, fingers flying over the controls with practiced precision. The hours she'd spent learning ship systems suddenly had immediate life-or-death relevance. Incoming. Kai shouted as the first enemy vessel opened fire. The Obsidian Dawn shuddered under the impact, but Reed's evasive maneuvers prevented direct hits to critical systems. The ship banked hard, accelerating toward a nearby asteroid field. They're trying to box us in, Riella observed, studying the tactical display. Standard outcast clan strategy. Herd the prey into a kill zone. Reed nodded. Suggestions. Riella didn't hesitate. They expect you to either run for open space or try to lose them in the asteroids. Do neither. Cut engines for 3 seconds, let them overshoot, then full reverse thrust and target their rear shields. It was a risky move, one that left them vulnerable for those 3 critical seconds. Reed studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him. Do it, he ordered. Kai, prepare to target engines on my mark. The maneuver worked perfectly. The pirate vessels, anticipating continued forward motion, surged ahead when the Obsidian Dawn suddenly killed momentum. As they adjusted to target the seemingly disabled ship, Reed ordered full reverse thrust, bringing them directly behind the lead vessel. Fire, he commanded. The Obsidian Dawn's weapons struck the pirate ship's weakest shielding. Explosions rippled along its hull as critical systems decompressed. The other 2 vessels broke formation, suddenly on the defensive. Target the second ship, Reed ordered. Same approach. Within minutes, 1 pirate vessel was crippled, another retreating, and the third attempting a desperate attack run. Riella's hands moved steadily over her console, adjusting shield harmonics to counter the enemy weapons. Boarding attempt detected. Dawson called out. Airlock 2. Reed cursed. They're trying a direct assault while we're engaged with the other ship. Kai with me. Dawson, maintain fire. Riella. He hesitated only briefly. You're with us. Bring your sidearm. The corridors echoed with the ship's battle alerts as they rushed toward the compromised airlock. 3 crew members were already there, weapons trained on the sealed door as breach alarms sounded. They're cutting through, one reported. 30 seconds, max.